Squint.
This video is sponsored by Squarespace, the Antoine Dupont of website builders. This is Springbok Rugby. Brutality, physicality. For generations, South Africa has prided itself on a particular style of play. Like putting a brick in the washing machine, South Africa spent their first 100 plus years, with a small intermission, on a rampage through international rugby. The public perception slowly grew. Les Bleus had French flair. New Zealand had All Black magic. But South Africa had violence. And for decades, it worked. A World Cup in '95, and consistently one of the best teams in the world whenever they were playing. And then, through the 2010s, the style perhaps grew old, as professionalism levelled the playing field on physicality and the game started to favour faster, more expansive rugby. Suddenly, enter this guy, Johan Rassie Erasmus, the only coach in rugby for PhD in Big Dick Studies, so Israel allowed you to apply for the course. Rassie's approach was simple, yet pretty brilliant. The game had changed immensely since South Africa were last on top of the world in 2007, and instead of trying to get the Boks to move with the times, Erasmus broke down every element of classic Springbok play and remoulded it to the modern game, finding ways to make ideas from 30 years ago effective now through sharp thinking and innovation. Everything old is new again. This was now Springbok Rugby. In an era where pop culture has been dominated by reboots, redos and rehashes, it's perhaps fitting that rugby was similar, Erasmus delivering that rare remake better than the original. Old school Springbok Rugby custom tooled for the 21st century. However, right after riding this to a second consecutive World Cup, pretty high accolade, becoming the first Springbok team to ever attain the title, Erasmus fought ahead. So, as we stand a few days out from the 2025 Rugby Championship, Springbok Rugby now looks like this. Exciting, flowing, more open attacking than ever. A 180 swing from 2 years ago. Style shifted, yet philosophy remaining the same. Which begs the question, what are the Boks doing differently now? And could this yet have the same impact on the game as the tactics did a few years ago? Or indeed, has it already? Because, man alive, did that Springbok system in 2019 have an impact. For 5 years, rugby has basically existed in reaction to that Springbok team. Defence, kicking, set piece, physicality came to dominate the game from 2019 to about 2024. To win test matches in that era, you had to play like the Boks. Odd exceptions cropped up, sure, Ireland, All Blacks, Japan, but almost all of them used at least a few innovations popularised by Erasmus and or his main mucker Jacques Nijnberg as a bedrock, or at least a garnish on their play. Every team, and I mean literally every team in professional rugby now uses elements created or at least perfected by the duo, particularly the defensive structure that seemed revolutionary enough to win a World Cup in 2019 that spread so far so fast that by the following year it wasn't just the Springboks no longer leaking tries. With everyone adopting elements of the system, the overall number of 5-pointers being scored dipped to its lowest level in over 20 years. The game had changed. However, Erasmus is not the only genius coach out there. Over the year leading into 2023, we saw plenty of other modern greats. Eddie Jones with England, Fabien Gauthier with France, Joe Schmidt with New Zealand, Andy Farrell with Ireland, and much beyond, start to iterate on their own ways to undo this structure. The Springbok defence that broke rugby, steadily being broken down. With virtually every attack coach worldwide on the job, in an arms race to be the first team to crack the thing, and knowing that whoever did it first would probably, almost certainly, walk away with at least a championship title or two, the dominance of that Springbok system was getting more and more under threat. Erasmus knew change was coming. The Springbok style of play could only remain on top for so long. Erasmus saw this coming and opted to think outside of the box. And indeed, outside the box. Nowadays, this is Springbok Rugby. In early 2024, somewhere between recovering from a hangover the size of Paris and his guest module on how to get back in your trousers, Erasmus announced a new look coaching panel to lead the Boks towards the 2027 Showpiece tournament. And whilst there were a few changes, one headline stood out instantly. Tony Brown was the new South African national men's team's attack coach. An 18-cap All Black fly half and certified rugby addict, Brown finished his playing career in Japan, and upon retiring, he instantly took over as the attack coach of the Wild Knights before moving back to New Zealand, where he quickly struck up a partnership with another Kiwi who spent significant time in the land of the rising scrum, former Brave Blossom himself, Jamie Joseph. In 2015, this pairing guided the Highlanders to their first ever Super Rugby title, playing some brilliant, incredibly exciting attacking rugby along the way, instantly becoming one of the most in-demand coaching tickets worldwide in the entire game. And so, with Eddie Jones departing to go annoy the English media, the Blossoms didn't need to think twice. Joseph and Brown were unveiled as Japan's new masterminds in early 2016. Their first few years were mixed, but as Rassie was busy reheating old dishes, Brown and Joseph became the other real story of the 2019 World Cup. Sorry, Uruguay. Japan served up a brand new way of playing the game, a brand we all loved watching. Knowing they had a lighter pack than all the other teams in their pool, including Samoa and Russia, Brown devised a way of playing that got the most out of their eight's dynamism, whilst Joseph's lateral thinking put it into action, pulling his entire first 15 out of club rugby for a full season to recondition him to fit in the game plan and so on and so forth. This was a tactic that would become known as the 1-3-2-2. It put Japan's best carriers into wider channels, allowing them to make major yardage up against backs, often the 13 or wingers, or in spaces at least less well defended, yet still guaranteed constant support because the system, because the structures, because players were always expected to be in the same positions on the field at the time, meaning their ball retention was also world class and they could play incredibly fast as a result. Inside 2 years, it felt like more teams than not had adopted the 1-3-2-2, including the Springboks. Brown's work with Japan was a classic example of necessity being the mother of invention. So, when Erasmus came to Brown in late 2023, the pitch must have been incredibly enticing. What if, instead of necessity, you had 8 men the size of rhinos? There is a very fair argument that Brown has the easiest, most enjoyable job in world rugby right now, at least second to playing wing for the Red Roses. You have a boss willing to roll the dice on anything. The most dominant scrum in the world to play off, a pack of forwards so big they could slip over a banana skin and still give you front foot ball, and endless access to the world's easiest to use website builder as Erasmus introduced him to Squarespace. In Japan, Brown got so caught up in trying to build a website the old-fashioned way, but Erasmus knew there was a quicker route to this, and so introduced Brown to Squarespace to get his manga import business up and online so he could run it now from South Africa as well as Japan. Inside no time, they built a storefront with items aplenty, all automized, and a mailing list all integrated into one place, one website, allowing Brown to keep potential customers involved with the latest comics coming in. He could build a blog for his recommendations, include clips from the internet or videos he made himself, all integrated simply, and the best bit, the ever online Rassie knew exactly how to get a discount code. He could quote it by heart. Using the offer code Squidge Rugby, Tony could save some money, and also, if you want to do the same, you can have the link in the description now and save yourself some money on a beautiful website. Fired up by this new website chat, Brown went all out, building another new system to move South Africa once again ahead of the curve. His philosophy is essentially the same as it was with Japan, but more extreme. Get your best carriers into stronger positions to create momentum you can play off, opening stuff up for the backs. Where what he was doing was, instead of Michael Leach or Kazuki Imano making 1 metre, we can try and make them make 5. With the Boks, the approach is more, well, instead of making 5 metres, let's see if we can create a try-scoring opportunity. The most obvious example is the part he's copy-pasted from his work in Red and White Stripes. We now regularly see Sia Khaleesi and Peter Steph in those Leach and Jimeno roles in the wide channels. Previously relied on to hit countless rucks and grind out individual initiatives in the middle, Brown very frequently, but not always, deploys the pair as edge forwards. Khaleesi has been doing this job for the Sharks already, and is better able to use explosiveness that got him to the Springbok shirt in the first place long before he's an iconic captain, but also uses game intelligence, allowing for subtle touches like this. Du Toit, on the other hand, is a totally different threat out wide, one rarely deployed there across his career. The usual move is to put an explosive carrier or a hooker there as a clean-out option on the extreme end of your set shape, but it's not the only way to play. Under Wayne Pivac, yes, Wayne Pivac's getting mentioned in this video, and attack coach Stephen Jones, the Scarlets and later Wales twisted that idea, instead using the likes of Tyke Byrne and Alan Wynne-Jones as their edge forward, guys with long limbs and strong offloading games to create continuity rather than explosive individual play, looking for offloads and small passes. Du Toit out wide allows for exactly this, as there aren't many 6'9" wingers there able to wrap him up, allowing for tricksy passes out of contact constantly, creating plenty of space for the actual wingers down, 4 foot below him. 2 years ago, these guys would have smashed up the middle, but now it looks like this. This is Springbok rugby. However, it isn't all fancy wide work. Their use of the other back rower is, shall we say, slightly more direct. Slightly more Springbok. This is a brilliant set move to generate maximum front football right down the middle. South Africa's maul is such a threat, it always has been, that remains the case. They're still really good at the maul, still really good at the scrum. Their core parts, they haven't changed at all. Let's leave it there. But Italy therefore have to mark it. But instead the ball goes over the top here. The second it leaves Mark's mitts, Zuliani reads the play and floods onto the tail, but there's nothing he can do about it here, right? Van Staden has been used as the scrum half here, allowing Van der Berg to fire him from deep from the kind of 10 position, hidden away. He drops off immediately to Pollard coming in from 12, hitting an angle with Colby then wrapping into the wing into the boot here behind their well-chosen assets. Pollard is the world's second best crash ball 10 after Harry Wilson, and Colby is Colby, meaning Italy will always have eyes on him if they spot him about. Pollard turns inwards looking to draw opposite number DeRay in, allowing Visa to run straight off his shoulder and well over the gain line. However, the next phase is baked into. De Jager here is used as a dummy lifter and immediately begins to work around to the far side, knowing where the ruck will be. Italy do a really good job of getting across in time, but with a forward already set, here they naturally honeypot on him and it allows DLL Diolande to run exactly Visa's line on his shoulder, the centre eventually losing it in contact, but on another day this could be a try. However, it's not just Rassie and his new mate Tony in this team. The Springboks have built arguably the most stacked bench of coaching talent in the game right now, and critically, aside from maybe scrum specialist Dan Human, every single one of them is capable of contributing to the attack. Felix Jones has flitted over his career between attack and defence as his area of expertise. Backs coach Wanky Stick is still about, trying to pretend he never went by that name, and we must never let him. Jerry Flannery was part of the Quins quad coach system, where instead of specialising purely, every coach got input on the other's areas, so will be able to contribute more willingly to attack than virtually any other defence or forwards coach out there. As such, it's notable that last year Erasmus stripped any differentiation and followed Quinn's suit. Brown, Jones, Stick, Flannery, Dion Davids and Dan Human are no longer specialised. They're just purely assistant coaches, as everybody has input in every area. As such, look how they iterate on that Visa move 1 week later. By bringing Mapimpi, the winger, in much tighter, it helps disguise Lebok playing Pollard's role until the last second. Menoncello here watching for the pass out the back to Mapimpi wrapping around, and he completely therefore misses Visa, who comes in later from deeper, hidden behind his centre during a more angled line. It was a good move the week before, but you can tell in the review the whole coaching panel poured over every detail and worked out how it can get better. Visa blasting up the line, and whilst Dutoy is ultimately held up over the try line a moment later, it's even close to the perfection they've been chasing, thanks to a blasting of small details. If two players adjusted their position by a single yard, it suddenly made it so much more dynamic. It's the sort of thing they're always working on, always looking at. Give it to your number 8 off a line out is a simple play, but this new set of Springboks have so many creative ways to run those simple moves that it becomes hard for Italy to anticipate the oldest play in the book. Here, Visa is used as a dummy lifter, then folds outwards before working back in field once the maul is formed, taking him out of the game kind of twice. Him and Marks then running extremely similar lines with Diolande on the short ball as well, meaning Italy is stuck watching all 3 options, and he can just put his head down and charge because they haven't picked him out as the carrier yet. This is Springbok rugby. These ornate set moves have become a huge feature of the green and gold game over the last year or so. Aarons' try in the first test is perhaps soft from an Italian perspective. They should be disappointed about this, but it's also incredibly astute work from Erasmus and Brown, plus likely Pollard calling it. Italy normally defend midfield lineouts like this. Standard but pretty smart. Scrum half in the hooker position to keep it out of the way, then flankers Zuliani in the scrum half position behind the lineout. Then the hooker waits in the main line next to fly half De Rey to help him in the tackle. Zuliani can then float into this channel if he wants and then work round to the far side to set their defence. However, with back row compatriot Canone in the bin, Zuliani comes in to help with a lift and they leave the receiver at the scrum half position empty. This is what the Boks are targeting. There's no gap there yet, but there will be soon because no one will drift across. The dummy maul engages most of the forwards, but Zuliani is an incredibly smart rugby player and doesn't fall for it, so they wrap Marks around purely to fixate the flank man. However, with only one Zuliani on the field, even if it felt at times like there was at least 6 of him in these 2 games, there's nobody tracking him from the 9 channel to aid young hooker De Bartolomeo in the tackle. It's one-on-one hooker v winger and pace tells. Aronson goes all the way. The Boks clearly have plays stacked for every situation. Opposition have a back rower in the bin, so this one comes out the pocket. If they defend narrow, the cross kick is always on. If they defend wide, expect plays like this against England, hitting to whip to drag their forwards out, opening a gap for Grant Williams. Yet a number of them are less about the opposition and more just about answering a core Rassie question. Think of this mad play a year ago, Sasha Feinberg and Gomezulu dropping into the line-out to target the hooker, or this maul play against Italy in open play, actually eventually creating a try madly through trying to get an extra maul in. All built from one very Erasmus philosophy. How do we get our traditional strengths more into the game? A marriage of Brown's ideas and that Rassie philosophy birthed the core of this new Springbok system. In Japan, Brown pioneered the 1-3-2-2 to get the most out of a smaller pack. The forwards spent all their time in possession grouped into these units, sticking to similar parts of the field. But with the Boks, he's given the opposite assignment. Where Stick had merely copied Brown's homework and got them playing 1-3-2-2 a year or so earlier, Brown has designed a brand new structure for forward play that's had a significant impact since. The new Springbok shape is designed to get the most out of a huge pack, whilst also transplanting a few of the macro ideas that Rassie rode last World Cup into micro details. Just as the Boks look to control the momentum of a match in 2019, they look to control the momentum of a set now. When in midfield, the Boks regularly deploy these pods of 4, with one usually standing slightly disconnected, slightly further back outside them, allowing them to slot into a second role if needs be, if it goes wide or if it goes in behind, perhaps as a runner, off 10 or a dummy option. However, instead of lobbing the entire pod into the ruck, the old system or the 1-3-2-2, we often see this. Play off an edge, a free pod is set with a 2 further in and Pollard in the boot. Vandenberg hits the widest option initial free, looking to cut out as many of these Italian defenders as possible. Lowe gets on the outside and can ride the weak shoulder going forward. Good carry. However, check how they set up for the next phase. 18 months ago, Etzebeth and Marks here would have been the guys to go in and clear out, with Ox and Visa setting up to carry next phase head on. Instead, however, Unshe breaks the bubble of the two-pod and heads into the ruck, with Etzebeth wrapping around the corner, soon joined by Tashuka, who was just getting off the floor from hitting the ruck we started on a moment ago. The pair float so close to this breakdown, it's a more difficult picture for the defender. Think about it, right? Yes, in the old system, the Boks had more stability. You knew Ox and Visa were always going to be there, but so did the defense. They had time to charge up and make the hit, apply a bit of line speed. This new system changes that. Carriers take position last second, it's near impossible. Even when they do go for those traditional pods, those traditional hit-ups, Willem Sahir steams in from the boot behind to carry himself with a step, catching Italy off guard before then it's Etzebeth's time a moment later to get up from the ruck and hit it up the following phase. The 4-pod in the centre of the field means there's always enough numbers to jump in or out, left or right, to fill in elsewhere. Support is baked in, able to both smash up the ruck fast and pick lines for an offload or small passes. You also get your guys carrying on the angle, allowing them to hit cold shoulders or small gaps instead of charging straight on. It's incredibly smart, and we've seen basically any team with a big enough pack start to follow suit, including the British and Irish Lions this summer. It allows for such momentum, which the backs can then play off. The wider pods are also pilfered regularly for clean-out options. It's frankly very rare that one player remains on the edge for an entire passage. In fact, that one player remains in any position for an entire passage. Never mind an entire game, as could be the case 2 years ago. But Dutoy and Khaleesi do very much feel like the defaults out wide, the most common options. Yet they're also still used as a foundation for back play. Everything playing off dummy lines selected by the likes of those, or then popping up as alternate wingers, providing a very different threat for someone to have to tackle. Making the team feel more joined up. Both wingers wrapping around regularly and working on the opposite edge as second or third receivers, instead of playing as purely finishers, as per a few years ago. The downside is this does consume considerably more energy from your forwards. You're constantly working, there's no second or so downtime after getting back up to your feet before you're working 10 metres and carrying. You're right back into the action, taking another hit, and that can be exhausting. Thankfully though, this is kind of a problem Rassie already solved 6 years ago. The props don't play edge, the Red Roses still have that over them, and we don't really see forwards drop back and distribute, so Justin Tipuric does remain undefeated. But otherwise, the Boks are seemingly working towards a world where every player can operate in as many roles as humanly possible. These forward shapes often use their centres, or even the IKEA multi-pack of small wingers and scrum caps they keep reaching back into and pulling a new one out of. Look at this, right? Listen, Diolande on the crash off the maul, grand, fine, they do that all the time, but no other team is throwing their 10 in then on phase 2 because it's faster than waiting for a forward to fold around the corner. Pollard gets over the gain line, and look how hard the Italian defence has to scramble to mark up in time, barely able to wrap Snyman up before allowing him to offload and start the sequence that gets Creel up within a yard or so of the line. A few pick and goes, and the commentator starts to sound like Israel Folau crying himself to sleep at night. Koch! Because ultimately, right, this is Springbok rugby. It's the pick and drives as much as the Edwins and Cheslins. It's the high ball as much as the maul. The scrum as much as chucking it about in the sun. Because for generations, Springbok rugby was oversimplified, boiled down to something more limited than it ever actually was. Something more one-dimensional. The first try the Boks ever scored against New Zealand was a brilliant solo effort by a winger. The famously Morley 17 boasted Brian Habana, one of the greatest, quickest attacking players of all time. And the brilliant 70s side was famed for their open-flowing rugby just as much as their penchant for knocking folk foul. This has always been Springbok rugby. Everything old is new again. Some things never change. Over his first 6 years in charge, Rassie Erasmus rejuvenated the headlines of Safford play. Now, he and his elite team of players and coaches are working on the rest.
Thanks for watching that. I hope you enjoyed it. We've got so much more coming up. There's obviously the Rugby Championship in a few days' time now. The Women's World Cup starts a week later. Next week, we're going to have a definitive guide for fans of the men's game to women's rugby. So please keep an eye out for that. We're going to have a look at, there's some more bits coming up around this. It's been absurdly busy. There's a lot going on. There's a lot happening. A lot more is going to be happening. I want to thank everyone that's watched on Patreon because genuinely it's allowing this to continue being possible. We've got the second channel, more Squidge Rugby, if you want to go and have a look at that as well, which is keeping things ticking over. So thank you so much, and we'll see you very soon for more rugby.
Gareth Edwards using the narrow side. Out to Duckham. My goodness, can't he move? Duckham inside H.O. de Villiers. This could be one of the tries of the season. De Villiers, lawless. Here's no miss on the overlap. Inside Jeffrey. Knocked over by Mervyn Davis. This is Jennings. De Villiers. This is great stuff. De Villiers, and a wonderful try for Ellis.